This episode of the podcast is brought to you by our friends at Regrow, the premier cloud-based cannabis supply chain management system.
If you're a cannabis operator that is unable to manage compliance across multiple licenses and states, or if you lack the ability to report performance analytics to help you maximize your 24-month cultivation and manufacturing plans, now is the right time to talk to the team at Regrow. Regrow is the premier cloud-based cannabis supply chain management system that helps you manage your cultivation, distribution, and manufacturing processes. If you have a vertically integrated and/or multi-state operation, Regrow will help you increase your revenue while keeping your entire operation fully compliant. Visit their website today at regrow.io. That's regrow.io. Regrow, the premier cloud-based cannabis supply chain management system. Hello, my fellow people of the plant. Kevin Carrillo here, and welcome to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connects podcast. My guests today are Ron Gershoni and Nathan Ferguson, co-founders at Jetty Extracts. Ron Gershoni and Nathan Ferguson, the men of Jetty Extracts. How are you guys?
Great.
Doing well.
I'm really excited to have you on today. And I first want to start with thanking you for the recent products that you sent for me to try out. The CBD Dablicator was awesome. I mentioned to Ron before we started recording, I was using it in my coffee every day. And the cartridge, the vape that you sent, the pen was awesome. Also, even the battery was superior from other batteries that I've tried in the past. So, you know, when you guys are really talking about raising the quality of your products and your extraction methods, you're really hitting the nail on the head with it.
Nice. Well, thank you. We appreciate the positive feedback for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what we're always striving to do, but it never gets old hearing it. So glad you enjoyed.
Yes. Well, thanks again. So let's talk a little bit about your products, you know, your methodology and the Jetty Extracts history and background.
Sure. Yeah, I could take a stab at that. Ron, feel free to jump in if I miss some things because the story is pretty lengthy and yeah, some interesting times. But yeah, essentially, you know, we all got together, Ron, myself, and a couple other kind of founders and partners, 2013, so about 7 years ago. Myself, I had some dispensaries, some grows in Northern California, Southern California, dispensary in Southern California, and really watched these sort of extracts go from a very small portion of my shelf at retail to grow into its own shelf and really a big category while I had the dispensary, and kind of knew there was something to it, the convenience, the ease, the efficiency. You know, and when vape first came out, it was all cut with glycol and, you know, just it never performed well. So we really set out to make a pure cannabis oil product that you could put in a vaporizer. At that point, like I said, the hardware and stuff, like it really needed to evolve. And, you know, Jetty has always been kind of pushing the envelope, helping evolve, you know, not only the equipment, the hardware, extraction methods, oil, all that stuff. We've really kind of been on the forefront and been boots on the ground the whole time.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can tell. And so, like, what is your methodology when it comes to product development? Like, you kind of sit back and you see what products are out there and you just think, how can we make these better? How can we innovate? Like, what is your thought process?
Yeah, I mean, it's all that. It really, you know, seeing what's out there and really like preference. We're all users and big fans of cannabis. You know, the founders and probably 90% of our employees. So we all really want to make something that we like and we want to use, that we feel safe, something that I could give to, you know, my mother if she wasn't feeling well, or something just to enhance my experience going surfing or snowboarding or whatever it may be. So something we stand behind, that we want to smoke, that we want to use, that we want to vape. And, you know, obviously staying with the trends, seeing what people are using, what people are liking. You know, live resin being a big category now. I think a lot of great flavor and innovation came throughout freezing cannabis and extracting, you know, and making live resin.
Yeah, and how about you, Ron? So like what's your take when it comes to product development, from the CEO's perspective of the company?
So there's a lot more market data available these days than there was back in 2013 and even back a couple of years ago. So we're able to get a lot of intel from places like BDS and Trees on what categories are moving, what types of products are moving. So we keep a keen eye on all of that. But we've been in this space a long time, and ultimately, as Nate said, we make products that we would want to consume, that look like products we would buy. And the barometer for us is really, is it something that's good for our staff, for the founders and for our families, something we would be proud to offer to people and something we would consume ourselves. And so far, that's kind of led us down the path in the right direction for product development.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can't imagine, like, the landscape in California is so different than, say, a state like Texas, which is, barely medicinal. They're working to expand the medical program here as the Texas legislature meets this week, and marijuana being, in the top 5 issues that they're focused on. It's number 4, which is very encouraging for the state. But take a state like California. Y'all have been adult use for a number of years now, and so, like, I can't imagine the competition when it comes to branded products. So tell me a little bit about the landscape and how y'all work to differentiate your brand from others that are out there.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, I think, for any California brand, because we're sitting here in California, which is by far the most competitive market in the world for cannabis, and so it's a big challenge and something we talk about all the time. How do you differentiate yourself? How do you stand out in a market where there's so many products on shelves? And what's really interesting is that in most categories, the top dozen or so brands really own 80-90% of the shelf space and the retail sales. So really supporting brand building activities to make sure that the brand is out there and is well distributed is something we've put a lot of energy into over the years. And as far as moving off shelves, it just all comes down to quality and price. That's really where the battle is won. And we've always kind of been on the forefront on the extraction side as far as different types of techniques we use, different types of products we're making. So focusing on innovation, which is what this market really loves, seeing new types of products hit the market, is something we've prided ourselves on. But it's also got to be priced right. And there are certainly some really high quality products that we see in the market. But when they're priced at a high price point, there's just very, very little bit in the way of velocity. And I think that's indicative of a somewhat immature market, where there's not a ton of ability at the mass level for people to differentiate. So it's really about hitting good products and just getting them out there at an affordable price, and trying to push the envelope. As Nate mentioned, live resin, using fresh frozen plant material is something that started a couple of years ago in our category. Prior to that, almost all extracted products were developed from dried trim, dried flower, and the market's really evolved into live resin, which has more terpene preservation, more of the cannabinoids that exist in the living plants. And our take on that is to go with a less modified, less processed version of that product, which we call an unrefined live resin. And looking forward, we're pushing on a solventless, which is something I'm sure Nate would want to talk more about, which is a technique that doesn't involve using any solvents like hydrocarbons or CO2 or ethanol to make the product. And we see that as kind of the future of this category.
Yeah, so solvent and solventless, for those that don't know, there's a lot of misconceptions, or people say solvent-free, which essentially could mean that the product no longer contains solvent, but you used a solvent in the extraction process. When we refer to solventless, that means there was no solvent, no chemicals, really just a mechanical type of extraction or separation. Um, so that's something we're working on in the future. In the past where we've came from, I mean, we've done plenty of solvent extractions. I don't think there's anything really wrong with using solvents if you're doing them safely in the right way and purging it properly. So, we started with CO2, we moved into ethanol. Right now, primarily we use all hydrocarbons, which is a mixture of different butanes and propanes. Again, totally safe. And if everything's purged well and done in a controlled room, in a controlled environment, there's no danger or risk of explosion or contaminating anybody if you're purging it well. And again, yeah, it's the solvents, have really evolved to, we know now what cannabinoids in are like or work synergistically with certain solvents. And so, doing these blends of different butanes and propanes, we really preserve more of the terpenes, more of the cannabinoids, and leave the things out we don't want. So that's really the bulk of what we do. And again, it makes a great product. And as Ron said, moving, a couple years down the line, I think there's a big play for people and just wanting like a pure, clean product that, didn't touch, has very little carbon footprint, really didn't touch any solvents. So we're focusing on that, and it does, there's a lot of techniques that are still evolving and growing to get it to scale. And right now it's small scale, but we're doing something that is unique to the industry in a way that, we're taking an old school bubble hash type method with just ice and water and doing all these refinement techniques, I guess, with using just heat and pressure. And, there's rosins and live rosins. And, we're taking it even a step further with an extra purification step that involves no solvents to even clean it up and purify it even more. Again, really retain the flavor, up the potency, make a really nice, pure, clean product.
Yep. And that last sentence that you just said there is exactly the experience that I had trying the product. Was, you're not losing that taste, and the potency is still there also, so you get the best of both worlds. And so, and Ron, I wanted to touch on what that point you made about California being the most competitive market in the world, right? And so, without a doubt, that's true. But I would also imagine that even with the illicit market thriving, that's a challenge also, right? Like, I mean, it's been echoed with guests that have been on. There's news that's talking about the illicit market in California. So where do they kind of fit in? And are they? Is it difficult to price your products when they're undercutting in some capacity?
Absolutely. The illicit market is far bigger than the legal market in California, and far more entrenched, even relating to distribution of those products throughout the state. I think COVID actually hurt the illicit market, just as things were more shut down. But most of the hash nerds or people who are really into the product have sources for high quality product that come from outside of the legal channels, and that is a constant challenge. The taxes and regulatory costs of running a California business in any vertical you're in are really, really high. And so those costs all get passed along in the legal channels that don't exist in the illicit market. And I think that the state is realizing that they're missing out on a lot of tax revenue, and is beginning to try to crack down somewhat on the illicit market. The legal market is continuing to grow, and I think it's just going to be something we're battling for years. But that does play into our pricing decisions, and it does continue to drive pricing down across the board. For the first bunch of years, we were very much sort of a manufacturing branding company. So we had a lot of relationships with different growers, and we weren't involved in the cultivation side. The pricing pressure is a big part of a big pivot we made about a year ago. So we got involved in a cultivation job in Lake County, which is a great place to grow cannabis, and the laws there are pretty favorable. But it allowed us to be slightly more vertical and control our costs, so that we could be more competitive in the market. And we've put a lot of energy really into learning more about the cultivation side. There's a lot of different types of new products out. Autoflowers are something that have really made a splash in the market and continue to improve. We're even getting some feedback that the profiles on extracted products from some of the autoflowers are as good or better than from full sun products, which is really something very new to us. But focusing on the cultivation side again has really allowed us to drive better gross margin, allows us to be a little bit more nimble in the market, where we have to compete so much. And it also gives us the ability to offer, more variety of strains and really do a lot of R&D on different types of strains to know, which ones yield better, which ones have better terpene content, which strains are better for solventless type extraction. So that as we move forward, having more of a library of knowledge on the genetics is going to allow us to be more competitive in what is, a really difficult space to operate.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, having cultivation in-house is key, and then collecting that data over the years and better understanding the strains, as you mentioned, is key. And but also, I mean, you talked about being vertically integrated. You also have extraction that's in-house as well. So talk to me a little bit about your extraction methods. I know, Nathan, you touched on it, but like, how has that been beneficial to have that extraction component in-house as well?
I would say, we essentially founded the company as extractors and just came along with it, but it was sort of simultaneous. And really, the first piece of the puzzle we got was an old CO2 extraction machine. And just, yeah, having that control of the product, not relying on third party processors, you know, having consistency, all those things come into play as, what you guys are talking about, the competitive landscape in California. Every little bit helps. So for us to be able to control the process in-house, to innovate, to tweak methods and tweak parameters, and sort of move with the market or be ahead of it in any way, shape, or form is highly beneficial. So it's a really great component to have. And then, yeah, attaching the grow and the control of the input product and having consistency there just really helps our extraction methods really evolve. Whereas before, when we're sourcing different material from different farms all over the place, there's tons of inconsistencies even in the same sour diesel strain that was grown by two different growers and two different regions of California. They're going to have different terpene profiles and different cannabinoid profiles and different phenotypes of the same strain. So anywhere we can gain consistency, whether it be cultivation or extraction, is just a huge benefit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And Nate, you touched on the best practices that y'all implement when it comes to extraction. Is there any growing techniques that you want to share and that you guys are doing?
We're looking more into I think soil development and working with the cultivators there as far as developing living soil, really just feeding the soil and not the plant. And if you have a really good soil medium to begin with, you're going to have a really good product at the end. So for us, yeah, I mean, it's just working with the cultivators and as Ron said, with the breeders and getting data and new crosses and the auto flower or full term or seed clone. It's just really having a good community of cultivators, of breeders, and the extraction component, kind of everybody working synergistically is really, really huge for us.
Ron, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think Nate really covered it. All I would say is that the techniques, as Nate's talking around soil and what I mentioned as far as different types of plants that you can grow, a lot of this is moving really fast and is new, and so there's a ton of improvements that we're seeing on an annual basis that are really helping drive drive efficiencies and variety. And so it's exciting to be kind of on top of all that. And the extraction is just kind of a core competency for us that is what we founded the company on. But really being able to control at this point from seed until finished product. This is the first time that we've been able to do that since we started the company. And it just gives us a lot better control of the product quality, consistency that we're putting into the market.
Right. No, yep. And you talk about the core competency extraction, which is a great, right? I mean, that's the origin in which your company was founded. And so what are your predictions when it comes to the future of the extracts category? Like, are there any predictions or trends that you're seeing that will happen in the future?
I think we spoke a little bit on, the solventless category, and really like, decreasing the carbon footprint. And, solventless style extraction has been around for thousands of years. If you take in account the old school Moroccan hash from back in the day. And I think it's really cool to kind of see that kind of come full circle. And, as the inputs, the cannabis that we're extracting gets better, the extracts are going to get better. So it's kind of all working together. But really seeing the solventless, I think there's more and more breeders breeding stuff specifically for solventless style extractions. So I know we're going to see that over the next couple of years. Really beyond that, I think it's just, we're seeing other minor cannabinoids that are getting bred up in the plants. So, we have a THCV line that is really interesting, and the effects are totally different. Another rare cannabinoid isolations, Delta 8, they're still figuring out the cannabinoids that are in the plant. So seeing those and isolating those and really just analyzing and then putting them out in a commercially available product, I think is going to be part of the future for sure.
Yeah, I want to ask you a follow-up question with the THCV. So how is that different than, say, smoking, your traditional Delta 9 THC?
It's very different. I describe it as, the simplest way to describe it, I feel, is, how a sativa, you would really expect a sativa to make you feel. It's very uplifting. People compare it to, having a shot of espresso. There's plenty of studies. I think the biggest thing that compound's known for is being an appetite suppressant. So it's the anti-munchy weed. Not to say if you're hungry going in, you're still going to be hungry after you smoke it, but what they're finding and what happens for me when I smoke it is I don't have the burnout portion at the end where I just want to eat cookies and pizza and just feed myself. It just, the high is really quick and uplifting, and then it just goes away. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting studies of it being, an appetite suppressant, it modulating your blood sugar a little. One study that's going on for it right now where it's actually a stimulant replacement. So if you have ADD and you're looking for a natural replacement for Adderall or something like that, they're studying THCV for it. So it's a very interesting compound, and definitely the effects, I would say, are noticeably different than Delta 9 in that it's very, very uplifting.
Wow. I appreciate you sharing that, because I've heard of THCV, but I didn't really know kind of what the effects would be, and kind of, and the way you put it was very helpful. And in Texas, Delta 8 is everywhere in the CBD shops, right? And I myself have tried Delta 8 flower. And I gotta tell you, I mean, so I've smoked the cartridge also. Obviously, the THC is isolated, so it's just kind of you're just kind of high, right? There's no other terpenes or minor cannabinoids in it to where you get those other feelings. But with Delta 8, with the flower, they spray, from my understanding, they spray the distillate on the flower to give it that psychoactive effect. Is that right?
Yeah, Delta 8 really doesn't exist naturally in the plant. There's very small portion of it, but they call it an isomer, and it's actually a conversion of delta 9. So yeah, in order to have a high amount on a flower or in a flower, you would have to infuse the flower somehow. But yeah, I've bet as we kind of talk about the illicit market, I've seen the illicit market go from like the cartridge illicit market being high delta 9 to, it seems like, yeah, all the cartridges on the illicit market are all delta 8 made from CBD. Somebody in Texas or Kansas probably, you really couldn't feel the difference between a delta 9 and a delta 8 high. It's still getting you high. It's made from CBD, so there's, people are saying, oh, maybe the criminal side of it isn't as risky because it comes from CBD. I think our legal team would probably argue differently, but yeah, it's really interesting to see how much delta 8 is out there, just illicitly and just, in the CBD shops nationally. It's really, really a trip.
It's crazy. Yeah. I mean, I was just at the CBD Expo in Houston, and it was everywhere. And the trade show, I mean, most of the exhibitors had Delta 8 products. And so it's interesting to see, different states gravitate toward different things in the capacity in which they can do so, right? Due to the state regulations and whatnot. And so speaking of regulations, we're seeing the Biden administration come in. We've gotten the blue wave as the Democrats have taken over the Senate. So what is y'all's kind of outlook now that we have all this new administration in place, and what does this mean for the cannabis industry in the future?
So we're happy on the legislative level to see that the Democrats have won the Senate. There's really more likelihood of movement through the Senate than from the presidency, and the previous Senate was willing to even put up for vote a number of bills that were pushed and passed through the House. So it's too soon to tell specifically what legislation is going to pass. It seems most likely that opening up of banking will be one of the first things. But we'll see. Kamala Harris has been a pretty big proponent of social justice reform and cannabis legalization. We could see full cannabis legalization and descheduling within the next few years. It seems more likely that it'll be more incremental, where they'll kind of legalize at the state level. One of the biggest things for companies like Jetty and for a lot of us in the industry would be taxation reform. We currently get hit really hard by a provision called 280E in the federal tax code that doesn't allow us to deduct certain expenses.
Which is crazy. This is so crazy. Yeah.
It's totally crazy. And it's been something that has been challenging for years to deal with. And a lot of companies have to jump through hoops to try to minimize that exposure, but it's still there. And I think banking and tax reform would be massive wins, short of a full legalization. And following full legalization, any sort of interstate commerce is something that anyone in California would be pushing for. We feel like, the industry was really born here in California. The product quality and knowledge is superior in California. As we talked about, the branded products are so competitive that everyone's really worked hard to get super quality out there at a really affordable price. And I think that, as you mentioned, what you've tasted from us is different than what you're getting in Texas. And I feel like the rest of the country, and really the world, is going to appreciate California cannabis just like they would Napa Valley wines. I'm from New Jersey. Nate's from Buffalo. Those markets are legalizing. We would love to see Jetty products on shelves where our family and friends from when we were younger could buy those products. And right now it's really hard to do that without sort of setting up your own license in another market or structuring a deal with someone who's licensed there, which is really sort of not a great way for a brand to grow. So over time, we we believe there will be interstate commerce. It doesn't seem like it's around the corner, but when there is, I do think that California is going to be a huge exporter of cannabis products. So, we're expecting some big movement. It seems that if you look at, for example, the public markets for cannabis stocks, they've all skyrocketed. So the sentiment is that legalization, at least at the state level, is going to accelerate. Markets in all around the U.S. have continued to perform really well. So just really nice tailwinds right now, after a couple of years of things that it just didn't seem to be any progress at the federal level. It really does seem like there's going to be some big moves in the next couple of years.
Yeah, there's definitely some really great momentum, and you touched on some really, really important issues that need to be addressed, right? I mean, the tax reform, you talked about the, banking, the Safe Banking Act that's been in legislation. And I want to ask you, like, from Jetty's perspective, have you guys had issues with banking being, a legacy company in California? I would imagine not now, but maybe in the beginning.
So I'll grab that one. I mean, one of the biggest fears I used to have every morning when I woke up was getting a call from Nate or from my bank that our account was shut down, because it happened all the time. I think in the first 2 years, we probably had 5 bank accounts shut down. So it was like every 6 months. And, that makes it really hard to operate a business. So yeah, it's been a huge problem. As recently as 2020, we had bank accounts shut down. I had a bunch of my personal bank accounts shut down in 2020, just because I work in this industry. So, we're still dealing with this type of issue, but absolutely, it seems like things are opening up. We just had the first bank we've ever worked with agree to bank us, knowing what we do and that we touch the cannabis plant. And that was actually before the election, which I think is a really good sign. But absolutely, it's been a huge problem. It's predominantly a cash business, which leads to so many other challenges. The amount of times that Nate and I have had to drive around with $500,000 of cash in our car, is too many to count. And just not having to deal with that anymore is something that I think we all look forward to, and that really is better for just safety of people who work in the space, and for the government just to be able to better monitor like what companies are doing, and have an understanding of what the who the good operators are, and who's playing fairly.
Right. There's no doubt about that. Well, hey, I really appreciate your guys' time and you sharing how Jetty Extracts is really raising the bar when it comes to standards of quality and the way in which you're extracting these cannabinoids from the plant, and even your cultivation practices that Nate touched on. So before we wrap up, Ron, Nate, I want to give you guys the floor. Is there anything that y'all want to say to the audience before we sign off here?
I didn't really have, anything off the top of my head that I'd like to say or get out there. I just, I appreciate, the movement in the cannabis space, everything you do, Kevin. And, we talked about just kind of where it's come over the last, 5-10 years. It's leaps and bounds. So, I mean, people like you getting the message out there, and, the audience for just tuning in and being interested in cannabis and the industry in a whole, I think is really cool, and stoked to see where it's going to go in the next 5 years.
Awesome. Thank you for the kind words, Nate. Ron, the floor is yours.
Yeah. All I'd say is we still have a huge opioid crisis here in the U.S. I think last year we had more deaths than ever before due to opioids, and I really believe that cannabis is a way of helping people, whether it's due to a specific ailment or illness, or just to help people relax and get through the day. And so, buy weed, buy legal weed is kind of what I would say. I think, what we've seen is a lot of new consumers are hesitant to come into the market due to the stigma and the federal status. And as that's changing, I think it's becoming something that more people are willing to venture into. And so I would just encourage anyone to try the different types of products. They're really good, and there's lots of different form factors ranging from inhalables to edibles to topicals. There's just a lot of interesting new products. It's the most exciting, interesting CPG market that's springing up from nothing into a multi-billion-dollar industry. And I'm super impressed. I know Nate is too, with just since 2013, the quality of the products and the variety of the products that have entered the market is really astounding. And so just get out and try the products. I think it's really eye-opening, and also is something, especially during COVID, when there's so much depression and everyone's got all kinds of challenges they're dealing with. It's something that helps people get through the day and through the week, and it's a healthier way of doing that than so many other types of vices.
Right. It's very well said, Ron. I couldn't agree more. And for those that are seeking these high quality products, specifically Jetty Extracts or Jetty CBD's products, where can they find y'all? What's your website and social media channels?
So our website is jettyextracts.com. A lot of information on Instagram at Jetty Extracts. But we're in a lot of dispensaries, about 300 dispensaries in California. So you can find us in pretty much any market you would be in California. So, if you go to our website, we have a store finder on there. But yeah, California centric at this point. Yeah, would love to see more people getting out there and buying products.
For sure. Well, hey, I really appreciate your guys' time again, and thanks for the insights that you shared. I know that our audience appreciates it as well. And I want to have you on again in the future as things evolve, nationwide, and then of course within California as well. So thank you again, guys.
Thanks so much, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin.
Absolutely. And thank you all for listening. Bye.